Friends, what I'm about to tell you will leave you speechless. Marcus Rashford has just turned down €300 million from Saudi Arabia because his sole obsession is to sign for Barcelona. But that's not all. Marc-Andre Ter Stegen is experiencing the most dramatic moment of his career, and a former German goalkeeper has harshly criticized the club for how he is being treated. Meanwhile, Hansi Flick has called up 10 gems from La Masia who could revolutionize Barcelona's future. If you don't stay until the end, you'll regret it forever. Friends, let's start with some news that shows the future of Barca is in very good hands. No fewer than 10 players from Barcelona Athletic have participated in the first team's training dynamics during these first pre-season training sessions. That's right, not 1 or 2, but 10 footballers that Hansi Flick considered to have the sufficient level to train with the best in the world. Let's review the names, because each of these young players represents a hope, a dream, a possibility that La Masia continues to be that talent factory that gave us Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, and so many others who have made the greatness of this club. Landry Faré is a defender who, every time I see him play, reminds me of those old-school central defenders, solid, intelligent, with a game-reading ability that is not normal for his age. Ibrahim Diarra is another name that catches my attention the most. This boy has an individual technique that takes your breath away and a vision of the game that makes me think we could be facing the next great midfielder for Barca. Tony Fernandes, brother of Gil, whom we will talk about later, is a fullback who combines speed and precision in passing, something many first-team players would envy. Fernandes, on the other hand, is probably the closest to making the definitive leap. This boy has something special, that spark that distinguishes good players from extraordinary ones. Jean Virgili is another of those talents who, when you see them training, you realize that Spanish football has a future. Juan, Joffrin, Pedro, Dani Rodriguez, and the Swede Rooney Bargi complete this list of chosen ones. But here's what's important, friends. Hansi Flick will make some very tough decisions in the coming weeks, because not all of these 10 players will be able to be part of the final list for the pre-season. The German coach will have to choose those who are really ready to make that leap in quality that training and competing with the first team of FC Barcelona entails. And as we all know, the pre-season is much more than just preparation matches. It's the time when young talents can show they are ready for the next level. It's when a coach can discover he has a gem in his hands. It's when dreams can come true or be shattered forever. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with Marc Bernal, for example. This boy has completely captivated me from the first time I saw him play. He has that elegance in his ball touch, that pause, that ability to find the pass that breaks the lines, which reminds me of the best midfielders this club has had. If Hansi Flick gives him a few minutes during this pre-season, I'm convinced we'll be talking about him for many years. Because in the end, friends, that's what Barca is all about. Giving opportunities to young people, trusting in the youth academy, keeping alive that philosophy that has made us unique in the world of football. And when I see that 10 players from the subsidiary are training with the first team, I can't help but get emotional because it means that the future is secure, that the essence of the club remains intact. But wait, because now comes what will really impress you, because what I'm going to tell you about Ter Stegen's situation is something that generates brutal controversy in Germany and could completely change the future of our goalkeeper. Friends, what I'm going to tell you now breaks my heart, and it's that the situation of Marc-Andre Ter Stegen generates a controversy that goes far beyond sports. Because when a colleague in the profession, a goalkeeper who has lived through similar situations, comes out publicly to defend our goalkeeper and harshly criticize the club, it's because something very serious is happening. René Adler, former goalkeeper of Hamburg and the German national team, has made statements that have fallen like a bomb in the world of football, and his words, friends, are devastating. He says textually that what is happening to Ter Stegen is a brutal blow to a captain and a very loyal footballer. And he is right. Do you know why? Because Marc-Andre has always been by the club's side, even when things went wrong, even when he was asked for personal efforts that went beyond reasonable. Let's remember the economic situation the club went through a few years ago. Let's remember how many players had to reduce their salaries, how they had to make personal sacrifices for the good of Barca. And Ter Stegen was one of the first to step forward, to show that the badge was above his personal interests. And now, when he comes back from a complicated injury, when he most needs to play to regain his best level, it turns out that he is not even given the opportunity to fight for his place, because that is what hurts me the most in this situation, friends. It's not that they have recruited Inaki Peña or that they are looking for another goalkeeper, it's that they are not even giving him the opportunity to show that he is still the best goalkeeper this club has. And that, as René Adler says, is not fair. It's not fair for a player who has given everything for these colors. Adler goes further in his statements and says something that I find very serious. We know how these mechanisms work. They are pushing him towards the exit and adds, this type of situation is not new at Barça. It's not the first time a veteran has been treated this way. These words are a direct attack on how the club is handling the situation, and, sincerely, I couldn't agree more with him, because in the end, what message are we sending? That loyalty doesn't matter? That years of service count for nothing? That when a player gets injured, he automatically loses his place without having the right to fight to get it back? This is not the Barça I know. This is not the Barça we all love. And the situation becomes even more dramatic when Adler explains the consequences this can have on Ter Stegen's career. He can't afford not to play, especially after a knee operation like the one he has undergone. Every match, every training session, every minute under the posts counts to regain the physical and mental confidence he needs. This is crucial, friends. A goalkeeper who comes back from a serious injury needs competitive rhythm. He needs to feel that he has the trust and support of the club and the fans. And if he doesn't play, if he doesn't have that continuity, he could lose forever the confidence that is fundamental in his position. But there is something even more important at stake, the World Cup. René Adler says it clearly. If a real option arises in a club where he could play regularly, especially in a year like this, I am convinced he will take it. He has to do it. If he doesn't play, he risks losing his place in the national team and compromising a World Cup that could be his big moment. And that's where the situation becomes truly tragic, because we're talking about a goalkeeper who has been an undisputed starter for the German national team for years, who has shown his quality in the most important moments, and who now sees himself forced to consider leaving the club of his life to not miss the opportunity to play in what could be his last World Cup. I tell you one thing, and I say it with my heart in my hand. I hope this situation does not degenerate into a bad departure. I hope the club and the player can find a solution that benefits both parties. Because Marc-André Ter Stegen deserves better than this. He deserves respect. He deserves an opportunity. He deserves to be treated as what he is, a legend of this club. You will tell me, no, Adri, but Ter Stegen should make things easy for Barça. And I understand you. Really, I understand you. The club is in a complicated economic situation. It has just recruited a goalkeeper and must make tough decisions. But that does not justify the way a player who has given everything for these colors is treated. Please, Marc-André, if you are listening to this, be reasonable, make it easy for the good of all. But club, please, treat this man with the respect he deserves, because in the end, the way we treat our legends says a lot about who we are as an institution. And now comes something that will surprise you, because Gerard Pique is moving the pieces in a way that no one expected, and his moves will directly affect the future of several Barça Youth Academy players. Friends, if there is one thing I must recognize about Gerard Pique, it is that he has always been a visionary, and what he is doing now with FC Andorra proves it once again, because the former Barça captain is taking advantage of his good relationship with Joan Laporta to create a perfect bridge between the first team and the youth academy players who need quality minutes. I told you some time ago that Andorra would have a close link with Barça in terms of loans and footballer development. And now, we see how this prediction is coming true to the letter. The first move is already underway and has names and surnames. Gil Fernandez and Tony Fernandez. The brothers who are called to be two of the great promises of the Blaugrana Youth Academy. Andorra has shown interest in recent hours in securing the loan of these two footballers and, frankly, it makes all the sense. Why? Because for these boys, Barça Athletic has become too small after the relegation of the category, but they do not yet have a place in Barca's first team. It is this uncomfortable situation in which many youth academy players find themselves. Too good for the subsidiary, but not yet ready for the first team. And that's where the ingenuity of Pique's operation comes into play. Andorra has just been promoted to the second division, which means it can guarantee these players something fundamental for their development: quality minutes in a competitive category. We are not talking about going to a third division team or a second B team to be a mere figurehead. We are talking about going to a serious, ambitious project, where they can continue to grow as footballers. Gil Fernandez is probably the one who will have the easiest time securing this loan. And it is that this boy has an impressive market. You know that Porto is behind him and there are several other teams closely following his progress, but Gil does not want to completely disengage from Barça, and that is the key to the whole operation. He wants to continue belonging to the club, He wants to continue being part of the project, but he needs to play. The loan to Andorra would allow him to have the continuity he needs without losing his link to Barça. It would be the perfect solution for all parties. The player would have minutes, Barça would keep control over his development, and Andorra would have a proven quality footballer. In the case of Tony Fernandes, the situation is slightly different. This boy made his debut last season, both in the pre-season and in the regular season, with the first team and was very important in the subsidiary. He has the experience of having been close to the first team, of having trained with the best, and that is something that can bring a lot to Andorra's project. Barça is currently only considering a loan for Tony. They do not want to lose him because they know he has the potential to reach the first team in the not-too-distant future, but they are also aware that he needs to play regularly to continue progressing. And they are not the only ones, friends, because Andorra is not only looking at Barça's youth academy, they are also looking at Girona's, which shows that Pique has a very clear strategy: to recruit the best young talents in Catalonia to create a competitive and attractive team. Remember that not long ago, Kvaratskhelia was also scouted by Andorra. And it is that Pique wants to take advantage of the situation and the good relationship he has with Joan Laporta to create something that could be revolutionary in Spanish football. A team that would serve as the perfect bridge between the youth academy and the first team of the big clubs. But not all the moves are towards Andorra. The last one to leave was Andrés Trulags, who went to Granada. And it is that, at Barça, despite its strong commitment to La Masia, not everyone can stay when situations like the ones we have just experienced occur. When you find yourself without an important position in a league where they could play and accumulate minutes, you have to look for alternatives. And obviously, we are talking about footballers who are well above the level of the categories in which they could play with the subsidiary. These are players who need a bigger challenge, who need to compete in higher categories to continue growing. The situation is complex, but also exciting because we see how the club intelligently manages the development of its young talents. It is not just about keeping them in the subsidiary until they are ready for the first team. It is about finding the perfect path for each player to develop their full potential. But now comes what will truly move you, as I have exclusive information on a recruitment that nearly slipped through our fingers and demonstrates that Barça remains a magnet for the best young talents. A few days ago, I told you a story that perfectly illustrates how the transfer market works in the lower categories and how the name Barça retains an attraction that goes beyond reason. The story of Alex Costa, a forward from Ponferradina, is a perfect example. This boy, who had scored 10 goals and provided 3 assists in 33 Primera Federación matches, was practically signed by Sevilla. He had passed the medical examination, agreed on the terms of his contract, everything was sealed. But then, at the last moment, Barça appeared on the scene. And when I say Barça appeared, I mean the club showed interest in him for Barça Athletic, not for the first team, not for a long-term project, but for the subsidiary. And yet, Alex Costa asked for a few hours to think about it, a few hours that turned into a few days because the decision was not easy. Ultimately, Sevilla officialized his recruitment. In principle, Alex Costa will play for Sevilla B, but with options to move up to the first team. And this possibility of jumping into the Sevilla first team tipped the balance in favor of the Andalusian team. But what I find most interesting about this whole story is not the final outcome, but what it demonstrates about Barca's power of attraction. A player who had everything sealed with another club, who had passed the medical examination, who was on the verge of signing, asked for time to think when the Barça option appeared. This says a lot about what this badge represents and also says a lot about the current situation of Barça Athletic, as the subsidiary has lost several important footballers like Ivan Cedric and has only kept Victor Barbera in attack, as Alan Godoy has also left on loan to Portugal. It made sense for the club to look for reinforcements in that position. Alex Costa was seen as a perfect market opportunity, a young striker, a goalscorer, with experience in a competitive category like the Primera Federación and with a profile that perfectly matched what the subsidiary needed. But ultimately, the promise of being able to play in Sevilla's first team weighed more heavily than the possibility of being part of Barca's project. And this leads us to a deeper reflection on the club's current situation. Because Barça remains Barça, it retains that unique power of attraction, but the reality is that it cannot offer the same guarantees of progression as other clubs. The economic situation, internal competition, financial fair play limitations. All of this makes it more difficult to convince players that Barça is the best option for their career. But let's not fool ourselves, friends. The fact that Alex Costa hesitated, the fact that he asked for time to evaluate the Barça option, demonstrates that the club still has something special. It remains a dream for many footballers. It remains that institution that can change a player's life overnight. And now comes the big news, friends, because what I'm going to tell you about Marcus Rashford will once again demonstrate that when a player wants to come to Barça, nothing can stop him. Friends, if there is one story that shows Barça remains the most desired club in the world, it's that of Marcus Rashford. And what I'm about to tell you now, based on information provided to us by Fernando Polo, is absolutely spectacular. After the information we gave you in the previous video about this approach from Juventus, it now turns out that Saudi Arabia has also gotten in the way of Marcus Rashford. And when I say they've gotten in his way, I mean they've made him an absolutely brutal offer. An offer that any footballer in their right mind would accept without hesitation. But Marcus Rashford is not just any footballer. Marcus Rashford has a dream, and that dream is to wear the FC Barcelona jersey, and for that dream, he is willing to refuse million-dollar offers, to wait as long as it takes, to fight against all odds. According to Fernando Polo, the English winger has turned down the offer from Saudi Arabia. He said no to an amount of money he probably won't see again in his lifetime. And why? Because he is clear that he wants to play for Barça, because he knows he is very well positioned after the fall of Nico Williams and the exorbitant price asked for Luis Diaz. And this is where the story gets really exciting, friends, because Marcus Rashford is not just turning down offers from other clubs, but he is actively waiting for Barça. He is forcing his departure from Manchester United. He is doing everything possible to facilitate his arrival at Camp Nou. As I exclusively announced to you here, Marcus will continue to wait for Barça for as long as it takes. And this reminds me a lot of what happened with João Felix. Do you remember? The Portuguese had also turned down offers from other clubs. He had also waited patiently for his opportunity, and in the end, he came to Barça. So that later, friends, it was said that players don't force their way, that no one wants to come to Barça, that the club has lost its power of attraction. It's brutal what this boy is forcing. It's brutal the determination he shows to fulfill his dream. And it's that Marcus Rashford knows something that many don't understand, that playing for Barça is not just a professional opportunity, it's an opportunity to enter the history of football, it's the possibility of being part of something unique, something special, something that goes far beyond money. The Englishman has seen how the fall of Nico Williams has opened a door that seemed closed. He has seen how the price that Liverpool is asking for Luis Diaz makes this operation practically impossible for Barça in its current situation, and he has understood that this could be his big opportunity. But let's not fool ourselves, the operation will not be easy. Manchester United will not let one of their best players go without a fight. They will ask for a significant amount of money. They will try to keep him until the end. But when a player wants to leave so clearly, when he is willing to force his departure, things usually end up working out. And Rashford is convinced of this. He knows that at Barça, he can find his best level again. He knows he can become that player who captivated half the world a few years ago. He knows that with Hansi Flick, he can exploit his full potential. He can become one of the stars of world football. You know that in my predictions, I have always told you that this was the most viable and simplest option. I have always believed that Marcus Rashford was the recruitment that made the most sense for Barça, both for his quality and for his availability in the market. And everything that is happening now proves me right. But as I always say, friends, in football, you never know. Time will give and take away reasons. What I can assure you is that Marcus Rashford is doing everything possible to make his dream come true. And when a player fights so hard to come to your club, it's very difficult for him not to make it in the end. And now comes something that will move you, as we will talk about the most immediate future and what we can expect in the coming weeks. Friends, the next few weeks will be absolutely crucial for the future of Barça. And when I say crucial, I'm not exaggerating one bit, because decisions will be made that will condition not only the next season but the coming years. The first thing we will see is the final list of players who will participate in the pre-season. Among these 10 Barça athletic players training with the first team, Hansi Flick will have to choose who stays and who returns to the subsidiary. And these decisions will mark the future of many of these young players. Marc Bernal, for example, has a lot at stake in these training sessions. If he manages to impress Flick, if he shows that he has the necessary level to be in the first team, he can make a giant leap in his career. But if he doesn't seize this opportunity, he may have to wait a long time for another similar one. The same goes for the other players. Landry Faré, Ibrahim Diarra, Tony Fernandes, Gil, Jan Virgili. They are all playing for their future in these training sessions, and the pressure must be enormous because they know this could be their big opportunity. We will also see movements in the transfer market. The situation with Marcus Rashford will be defined in the coming weeks, and he could be the recruitment that makes the difference in the next season. But other opportunities may also arise, other names that are not on the radar at the moment but could end up being important. Loans will also be key. The agreement with Andorra for Gil and Tony Fernandes could be the first of many others, and how these loans are managed will be fundamental for the development of the players and the future of the club. But perhaps the most important thing of all is to see how the atmosphere in the locker room evolves, because all these changes, all these decisions will have an impact on the group's dynamics, and if they are not managed well, they can create problems that go beyond sports. The situation with Ter Stegen, for example, can generate tensions if it is not resolved satisfactorily for all parties. Veteran players may feel that if a captain like Marc-Andre is treated this way, the same could happen to them in the future. That's why it's so important for the sports management and technical staff to handle this entire situation with a lot of emotional intelligence, to understand that it's not just about making technical or economic decisions, but about maintaining harmony in the locker room and the trust of the players. And now comes something that will make you reflect on what it truly means to be part of Barça in these times. Friends, amidst all this news, all these movements, all these decisions, there is something we cannot lose sight of, the essence of FC Barcelona. Because in the end, beyond the recruitments, beyond the results, beyond the economic situations, there is something that makes us unique and that can never change. This essence has to do with how we understand football, with the importance we give to the youth academy, with the respect we show to our players, with how we treat the people who have given everything for this club. And when I see that 10 Barça athletic players are training with the first team, I get emotional because this is the Barça of always. This is what has made us great, this trust in the youth, this bet on homegrown talent, this ability to create stars rather than buy them. But it also worries me when I see situations like Ter Stegen's, because regardless of the economic or sporting reasons that may justify certain decisions, the way we treat our legends says a lot about who we are as an institution. Marc-Andre Ter Stegen is not just a goalkeeper, he is someone who has defended these colors for years, who has lived through the most difficult moments of the club, who has been an example of professionalism and commitment. And this cannot be forgotten, no matter what happens. The essence of Barça also has to do with how we manage difficult situations, with the ability to find solutions that benefit all parties, with intelligence to make decisions that respect both the interests of the club and the dignity of the people. And in this sense, movements like the one with Andorra seem very wise to me because they show that we can be intelligent without losing our humanity, that we can make strategic decisions without forgetting that we're talking about people, dreams, lives. Friends, we are coming to the end of this overview of all the news that marks the current affairs of Barça. Tell me in the comments what you think about everything we talked about today. Do you think Marcus Rashford will end up coming? What do you think about Ter Stegen's situation? Which of the youth academy players do you think has the best chance of success? And don't forget, if you liked the video, this like helps me a lot. If you are new, the subscription is free and makes me very happy. And if you want to be aware of all the Barça news, we will always be here. Visca el Barça and see you next time, friends.